My name is Clara. I'm 28, and I'm a property manager, and a life I built entirely from scratch, with my own two hands. Not a single person ever gave me a handout. My Tuesday started like any other. Coffee, spreadsheets, a call with a contractor. Then my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Dad, I answered, and the dam broke. He was frantic, screaming about the bank, about foreclosure, about losing the house. He was begging, demanding, that I give him an astronomical sum of money. I listened to his panic, and I felt nothing. A cold, strange calm settled over me. I can't do that, I said, my voice even. The explosion was immediate. Can't? After everything we did for your sister, you owe us. You're tearing this family apart, he roared, throwing every ounce of guilt he had at me through the phone. I waited for the hurricane of his words to stop. I let the silence hang in the air for a second, savoring it. Then, I delivered the line I had been waiting a decade to say. I know the bank foreclosed, Dad, I said, my voice like ice. Because I'm the one who just bought your house. Dead silence. Then, I added the final twist of the knife. And Jenna's too. Ever felt like your own family was your biggest obstacle? If you have, you already know this is just the tip of the iceberg. Stick around, because you are not going to believe how we got here. To understand that phone call, you have to understand the two different families I grew up in. They just happened to share the same house. My family, and my sister Jenna's. My journey started when I was 15, at a place called The Daily Grind, a greasy spoon diner where the air was thick with the smell of old coffee and bleach. That was the smell of my future. I worked weekends, holidays, any shift I could get. I remember my first $100 bill. It felt like a brick of gold. I took it home and hid it in an old shoebox under my bed. On the side, I wrote in black marker, college. Every single dollar I earned went into that box, and later, into a savings account my dad begrudgingly co-signed. The difference between my world and my sister's was never clearer than on our 16th birthdays. For mine, my parents gave me a crisp $50 savings bond. A smart investment for a smart girl, my dad said, patting me on the head. I was grateful. It was practical. It was for my future. A few weeks later, it was Jenna's 16th. I came home from school to find a bright red convertible parked in the driveway with a ridiculously huge bow taped to the windshield. Jenna was squealing. My parents were beaming, like they'd just discovered a new star in the sky. It wasn't a practical gift. It was a declaration, a statement of her value. My value was measured in what I could achieve. Hers was just a given. I poured myself into my schoolwork. I joined the debate team, the honor society. I won a major regional scholarship that would cover my first year of tuition. I practically floated home, the acceptance letter clutched in my hand like a winning lottery ticket. I burst through the door, ready to share the news that would change my life, only to find the living room shrouded in gloom. My mom was on the couch, stroking Jenna's hair while she sobbed her heart out. My dad was pacing, looking distraught. What was the crisis? The tragedy? Jenna hadn't been voted prom queen. My scholarship letter suddenly felt flimsy, ridiculous. My achievement was a whisper in the roaring hurricane of my sister's minor disappointment. My mom looked up at me, her eyes saying, "Not now." She pulled me aside later in the kitchen. "Jenna's just more sensitive, Clara," she told me, her voice soft and conspiratorial. "You've always been the strong one." It wasn't a compliment, it was an excuse. An excuse to parent one child and manage the other. I was strong, so I didn't need their attention, their praise, their help. I was the family workhorse. Jenna was the delicate show pony. The day I saw the number in my savings account tick over to $20,000, I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in my car in the bank parking lot and stared at the receipt. $20,000. 4 years of greasy aprons, early mornings, and missed parties. It was my escape hatch. My proof that the strong one could get out on her own. It was a moment of profound, lonely pride, and I had no idea it was all about to be stolen. The fuse on my $20,000 time bomb was lit the day Jenna, at 20 years old, announced she was pregnant. I was home from my summer job, trying to calculate how many more shifts I'd need to afford my textbooks for the upcoming semester. Jenna waltzed into the living room, her boyfriend trailing behind her like a lost puppy, and dropped the news. For a normal family, this might have been a moment of concern. A 20-year-old with no job, no savings, and a boyfriend who thought a hedge fund was a type of garden. But in our house, it was cause for a celebration. My mom started crying happy tears, my dad started talking about grandbabies. There was no discussion of responsibility or reality, it was just assumed that the family, as a collective, would handle it. And I was starting to learn what the family really meant. A month later, Jenna was obsessed with buying a house. Not a starter home, not a small condo. It had to be a 4-bedroom colonial in a brand new subdivision with a 2-car garage and a yard for the baby. Her boyfriend, who I don't think had ever successfully balanced a checkbook, nodded along with every delusional fantasy. They talked about this house not as something they needed to work for, but as something they were entitled to. A stage for their perfect little family, paid for by, well, that part was always fuzzy. Then came the summons. "Clara, we need to have a family meeting tonight," my mom said over the phone. Her voice had a weird, forced cheerfulness that immediately set off alarm bells. I drove over after work, a pit forming in my stomach. The scene in the living room was like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. My parents were on the sofa, looking incredibly uncomfortable. Jenna and her boyfriend were sitting in the armchairs, looking smug and expectant. I was the only one left standing. It was an ambush. My father cleared his throat and launched into a speech he'd clearly rehearsed. He talked about the importance of family, about new beginnings, about giving the next generation the best possible start in life. He used phrases like, "for the good of the family," and "a wonderful investment in your future niece." It was a whole lot of pretty words to wrap around a very ugly truth. I just waited for the hammer to fall. And then it did. "So," he said, finally getting to the point but still refusing to look me in the eye. "Your mother and I decided the best thing to do would be to use your college savings for the down payment on Jenna's house." The words just hung there in the air. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. He must have seen the look on my face because he quickly added, "It's a loan, of course. Jenna will pay you back, with interest, once they get on their feet." A loan. The lie was so blatant, so disrespectful, it was almost funny. I looked at Jenna. She was beaming, not a flicker of guilt on her face. She looked at me as if I should thank her for giving my life savings such a noble purpose. They hadn't asked me, they had told me. My 4 years of work, my entire future, hadn't been a negotiation. It was just a resource they had decided to allocate elsewhere. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. What I felt was cold. A deep, profound, Arctic cold that started in my chest and spread through my veins until my fingertips were numb. It was the chilling sensation of a final, irreversible truth. A hot surge of betrayal should have coursed through me, but it was just ice. The sounds in the room seemed to warp and fade, like I was underwater. The ticking of the clock, my father's nervous shuffling, it all became a distant hum. The only thing in sharp focus was my sister's face. She wasn't even trying to hide it. A small, triumphant smirk played on her lips, and in that smirk, I saw everything. I saw every birthday party, every ignored report card, every time I was told to be the strong one. It wasn't just my money they had taken. It was the entire illusion of family. In that one instant, the bond didn't just break, it atomized. It turned to dust and blew away. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the drama they were clearly expecting. What was the point? Arguing with them would be like arguing with the rain. They were a force of nature, and their nature was to flow in Jenna's direction. So, I just stood up. The silence that followed was louder than any argument I could have made. They all stared at me, confused. My mother opened her mouth to say something, probably another platitude about family, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned without a word and walked to my room. My room was a museum of a life spent trying to earn their approval. Debate trophies on the bookshelf, academic excellence certificates on the wall. A framed letter from a state senator congratulating me on my scholarship. All of it was proof of my effort, my grind. And all of it was worthless. It was a currency they didn't accept. I opened my closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and packed only the essentials. A few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, my laptop. I looked at the shoebox for my college fund, now empty on the shelf. Then I looked at the trophies one last time. Symbols of a girl who thought love was something you could earn. I zipped up my bag and left them all behind to gather dust. I walked back through the living room, heading for the front door. They were still sitting there, frozen in their little tableau of betrayal. As I put my hand on the doorknob, my father finally found his voice. "Don't be so dramatic, Clara," he said, not with concern, but with annoyance. "You'll be back when you've cooled off." It wasn't a plea, it was a dismissal. He wasn't seeing a daughter whose heart had just been ripped out. He was seeing a temporary inconvenience, a hormonal outburst that would pass. He was wrong. That night, I slept on a lumpy couch at my friend Sarah's tiny apartment. The springs dug into my back, and the city traffic never really stopped. I should have felt lost. I should have felt homeless. Instead, as I stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, a strange feeling washed over me. It was peace. It was the quiet calm of a person who has finally hit rock bottom. I had nothing. No money. No family. No home. And it was the most liberating feeling in the world. I had nothing left to lose. Which meant I had everything to build. For myself. On my own terms. The old Clara died in that living room. The new one was just being born. My new life was a brutal, relentless rhythm. My days were a blur of fluorescent lights and the clacking of a keyboard at a mind-numbing data entry job I took from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. My nights were spent in a different uniform, smelling of stale beer and fried food, serving tables until well after midnight. I'd stumble home to Sarah's couch, my bones aching with a special kind of exhaustion, and wrestle with community college textbooks for an hour before passing out. Sleep, wake, repeat. This was my grind. This was my punishment and my salvation all at once. Years started to blur into one long shift. In all that time, my family never once called to ask if I was okay. Not a single text, not one voicemail. Did they even know where I was? Did they care? The only contact I had was a single piece of mail every December. A glossy Christmas card with a professionally photographed picture of Jenna, her husband, and their growing brood of children. They were always posed perfectly, smiling in matching sweaters. A picture of domestic bliss, built on the foundations of my stolen future. The card never had a personal note, just a pre-printed "Happy Holidays" from the Millers. Each year, it felt like a little paper dagger, a reminder of what they took and how little they thought of me. I stopped thinking about them. I had to. All my energy, every spare dollar, went into one goal: climbing out. After 3 years of scrimping and living on instant noodles, I had saved up a tiny down payment. Sarah, who had gone from friend to sister, had a mentor in real estate. He saw the fire in my eyes and helped me navigate the paperwork to buy my first property. It wasn't much. A small, run-down condo in a forgotten part of town that smelled like cat pee and regret. But it was mine. I spent every weekend there, learning how to patch drywall and fix leaky faucets from YouTube tutorials. It was more than a home. It was the first brick in my new life. The call that changed everything came from a cousin I barely spoke to. She was the one vaguely sympathetic voice in the extended family. After some awkward small talk, she let something slip. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered, "but your parents had to remortgage the house. It's bad." I asked why. The reason was as predictable as the sunrise. Jenna had tried to become a mommy blogger. She'd racked up tens of thousands in credit card debt buying props, clothes, and tech for a business that never made a dime. My parents, of course, had bailed her out. Again. Hearing the news, I waited for the familiar sting of sadness or anger, but it never came. What I felt instead was a strange, chilling clarity. It was like a business analyst looking at a failing company's financials. They were never going to change. The apologies I once daydreamed about would never arrive. They weren't a family to be reconciled with. They were a bad investment, a sinking ship, and I was finally, truly, on the shore. I stopped thinking about the past, and I started thinking about the future. Theirs. That one rundown condo turned into 2, then 3. I incorporated, creating a small property management company. It was my shield, a legal entity that had no history, no baggage. To my tenants, I was Miss Vance, a firm but fair landlord. To my family, I was nothing, a ghost, a forgotten story. And that was my greatest advantage. I was building a small kingdom in the shadows, and they never even thought to look. The silence was broken on a random Wednesday afternoon. My phone screen lit up with Jenna's name. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, "Clara? Wow, I can't believe I got you," she said, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that set my teeth on edge. After a few painfully awkward pleasantries, she got to the point. She had a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. Something about selling artisanal baby clothes online. All she needed was a small investment to get it off the ground. A loan. I recognized the language. The same manipulative script they'd used on my parents for years. The old me would have argued, or gotten emotional. The new me was different. "Jenna, I'm not in a position to help with that," I said, my voice calm and professional. The sweetness vanished. "Not in a position? What does that even mean? You have a job, don't you? It's for my kids, Clara. Your own nieces." "My answer is no," I repeated, my tone unchanged. She let out a frustrated scream and hung up. It was the first boundary I had ever enforced with them. It felt good. A few months later, I was doing my nightly ritual, scrolling through new property listings, looking for opportunities, and then I saw it. An address I knew as well as my own name, my childhood home. It was listed under foreclosure auction. My heart didn't sink, my stomach didn't drop. It was the strangest thing, I just felt a quiet, grim sense of inevitability. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a destination they'd been driving toward for years. A week later, another listing popped up. A 4-bedroom colonial in a new subdivision, Jenna's house. The foundation of her perfect life was cracking too. The consequences, so long deferred, were finally arriving for all of them. I printed out both listings and took them to Sarah's office. She was my business partner now, the sharp, logical mind that balanced out my gut instincts. I laid the papers on her desk. She looked at them, then looked at me, her eyes searching my face. "Emotionally, this is a minefield," she said. "But financially, it's a no-brainer. Both properties are in good locations, and the banks just want them off their books. They're undervalued assets, Clara. Don't think of them as houses. Think of them as inventory." And just like that, she gave me the permission I needed. It wasn't revenge, it was business. That night, I sat alone in my office, the glow of the monitor lighting my face. Through my company's anonymous credentials, I logged into the auction portal. My hands were steady as I typed in the numbers. I placed the winning bid on my parents' house. Then I did the same for Jenna's. There was no triumphant cheer, no surge of joy. Just the quiet, satisfying click of a mouse. A sense of grim, poetic justice settled over me. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the phone to ring. The phone rang, just as I knew it would. I let it go for a few rings, took a deep breath, and answered. Sarah was sitting across from my desk, watching me with a supportive, steady gaze. "Clara? Thank God." My father's voice was a ragged mess of panic and desperation. "You have to help us. The bank is taking the house. They're throwing us out on the street. After all these years," he was rambling, his words tripping over each other. In the background, I could hear my mother weeping, a high-pitched, keening sound that had been the soundtrack to every family crisis I'd ever known. He started talking about numbers, about deadlines, about how they just needed a loan to tide them over until they could figure things out. He wasn't asking for help. He was demanding a bailout. The same way he always had. As he spoke, a decade of resentment solidified not into anger, but into a diamond-hard resolve. He was seeing me as a solution to his problem, an emergency fund, a daughter he could finally cash in. He wasn't seeing me at all. He never had. "We've been good parents. We gave your sister everything she needed to start a family. You owe us this, Clara." "Family helps family," he yelled, his voice cracking with entitlement. And that was it. That was the moment. The calm that settled over me was absolute. It was the calm of someone holding a royal flush when the other player has just gone all in on a pair of deuces. "I can't do that, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a razor. The explosion was predictable. "Can't? What do you mean you can't? After everything we did for your sister, you owe us. You're selfish. You're tearing this family apart." I waited. I let him empty the clip. I let all the guilt, all the accusations, all the pathetic, manipulative venom spill out. When he was finally done, breathing heavily into the phone, I let the silence stretch. Then, I leaned forward, my voice low and clear, each word perfectly polished and sharpened to a point. "I know the bank foreclosed, Dad, because I'm the one who just bought your house." The silence on the other end was like the end of the world. It was a vacuum, a total absence of sound. I could picture him perfectly, his mouth open, the color draining from his face. I could almost hear the sound of his reality shattering. And then I delivered the final, devastating blow. And Jenna's too. I heard a thud, like the phone being dropped. Then a muffled shriek, my mother, followed by my father yelling my name, not with anger this time, but with a kind of strangled horror. I didn't wait to hear any more. I ended the call. My hand was perfectly steady as I placed the phone back on my desk. Sarah got up, walked over, and put a firm hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, looking her in the eye. "I am." "Good," she said, her voice full of a conviction that bolstered my own. "You didn't do this to them, Clara. They did this to themselves. You just bought the assets they abandoned." Her words were the final validation I needed. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a business transaction. My phone started buzzing violently, a relentless flood of texts. Hysterical, misspelled rants from Jenna. Curses and threats from her husband. Bible verses about honoring thy father and mother from my mom. It was all just noise. I read them, felt absolutely nothing, and then, one by one, I blocked their numbers. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. A week after I blocked their numbers, the official notices were delivered. Cold, impersonal letters from my property management company were posted on the doors of both houses. They were standard eviction notices, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises. The law is the law. The panic must have been extraordinary. Where would they go? What would they do? They had no savings, mountains of debt, and now, no homes. Their self-made trap had snapped shut. But I wasn't a monster. I was a business person. 3 days later, a second set of letters arrived. These were from the same company, offering the current occupants of both properties the opportunity to remain as tenants. The offer included a standard 1-year lease agreement at the current fair market rate. No discounts, no special treatment. They were trapped. Their credit was shot. No one else would rent to them. They had no choice but to sign. I didn't see it happen, but I can picture it. My father, his hand trembling with rage and humiliation as he signed the lease for the home he used to own. Jenna, crying as she legally agreed to pay rent for the house that was supposed to be her birthright. The first of the month came. 2 electronic transfers appeared in my business account. The memo line for one just said rent. The other said house payment. The irony was delicious. That evening, I was sitting in my own apartment. A place I owned, free and clear. It's a minimalist space, with clean lines and big windows overlooking the city. And it was quiet. So incredibly quiet. For my entire life, my headspace had been occupied by their drama, their needs, their expectations. It was a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, but now, silence. It wasn't an empty silence, it was a peaceful silence. It was the sound of my own life, finally, truly, beginning. For the first time since I was that 15-year-old girl in a greasy apron, I felt completely and totally free. A few weeks later, I was out to dinner with Sarah and a few other close friends. The people who had seen me at my lowest, who had let me sleep on their couches and cheered on my every small victory. We were celebrating my company's acquisition of a small apartment building, a new, major step for me. There was laughter, real laughter. There was support and mutual respect. Nobody wanted anything from me, other than my happiness. Looking around that table, I realized this was family, the one I had chosen, the one I had built. A found family, stronger than one forged by blood and obligation. My success isn't just about numbers in a bank account anymore. Last month, I used the profits from my company to launch a new project, the Foundation for First Starts. It's a small nonprofit that provides housing grants and tuition assistance to underprivileged students who are putting themselves through college without any family support. The first scholarship was awarded to a young woman who works nights as a waitress to pay for her nursing classes. When I told her the news, she cried. And for the first time, I understood what it was to truly change someone's life for the better. I'm giving others the chance that was stolen from me. I'm turning my deepest wound into someone else's armor. My old family still pays their rent on time. I have no idea what they think or what they say about me, and I don't care. Their story is over. Mine is just getting started. They took my foundation, so I learned to build my own empire. They thought my value was what I could give them. My real value was in what I could build for myself. They taught me the most important lesson of all, by accident. Never, ever, let anyone else hold the deed to your future.